Our penultimate speaker for the day is the president of the Canterbury University Students Association. He has recently graduated with an LLB and a BCom, and to give us his perspectives on the recreation of the Central City, it's a pleasure to welcome Kohan McNab. Please welcome Kohan.
We hear that now? Oh, there we go. Well, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to see you all here. Thanks for the opportunity to come down and address you. My first impression when they asked me to come down and speak was pretty much that I felt I was hopelessly underqualified to come and speak on a topic like this that sort of affects the whole city. But then I thought, well, about a year ago I was hopelessly underqualified on earthquakes as well, and since then I've pretty much become, like we all have, the walking Richter scale. So I think we've all done that one where you give about 4.1. So I thought, well, if I can manage that, I may as well come down and give the speech a go as well. Before I launch into it, I'll just give you a bit of background on myself. And I'll just mention as well, I know the big thing with students at the moment is sort of around the student volunteer army and things like that. I've sort of focused a little bit more on the centre city rather than the university side of things, but I'm happy to answer any questions about that at the end, of course. Would like to have a chat about that one. So basically, this here is the farm I grew up on. It's in a little place called Ruapuna in mid-Canterbury. And so I feel really lucky to have grown up in such a distinctive part of Canterbury as well. But as you can see, it doesn't give me a huge insight into urban design. That's the city centre there. So it's not exactly a booming metropolis. So I wouldn't say I'm overly qualified from my background there, but over the last 5 years I've been living in Christchurch, as Mike said. Been at the University of Canterbury studying LLB BCom, recently graduated in a tent on Island Fields, so that was a first, I think, for everyone involved. So in the sense, I don't really want to speak from a technical point of view because I don't have too much of one, but I think I'd like to speak from a perspective of someone who lives in Christchurch and is a resident, and I guess is sort of a young person living here as well, so I guess as Dem said, I'm the voices of the young people, so that means that Sam Johnson wasn't available today, but that's fine. So rather than focus on the specifics, I'd like to talk about sort of the wider vision and wider concepts that I think are really important to a centre city, why it's important, why we need it, and why we should focus on it. And so I'd like to point out, say that although we're not all experts, we all have something to contribute, and I think that's the most important thing to identify first, and that because we all see the city from different angles, we all see different elements, we all have different viewpoints, it's really important that we are engaged as citizens of Christchurch and make sure that we get our point across, and that's what today's so good. Sort of a thing that I relate it to is my dad has farmed this area for 22 years, and yeah, he says that he'll never get sick of it. When I asked him if he was sick of it, he said he'd never get sick of it because every day it's a little bit different. No 2 days it's the same. He said, you know, the light will hit it differently or something will change, and I think that kind of reminds me a little bit of what it's like for a population looking at their home, looking at their city, is that everyone has that different viewpoint. And to no two people is the place the same. And so that's sort of why another reason I came to talk down here today, because I want to make sure I have that active contribution. I want to be an active participant in our city rather than just a victim of what's happened. And so that's why I think it's really important and really good to see that everyone's come down here and taken that opportunity to contribute. So I guess we're talking about within the 4 avenues here. And I think the first question that sort of sprung to mind, and sort of because I'm just not an expert on these things, I'm trying to start everything from the base value and take it back to the very first question that comes to mind when I think of these things. And so in terms of this situation, the first question that comes to mind for me is, why do we want to rebuild the centre city? What is the importance of it for us? And so I was sort of looking like, what is it the things we miss from the centre city? Is it the shopping? Well, we've got the suburban malls for that, and I'm sure we all know how lovely Rickenham Mall will be right now at 3:30 on a Saturday afternoon. And in terms of the concentration of business and commerce, well, we've heard the discussions around that today. Surely that contributes to congestion, and at the moment we're not sure about just the sturdiness of of the soil and what we're building on, and we're not aware of those things. So why would we want to go down and build down there? And what else is there in the centre city? I mean, prior earthquake, there were those emo kids who used to hang out in Cashel Mall. Is it them we missed? Because I'm pretty sure we could find them anywhere. But so I'm being a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and I am, because from my point of view, and I think the point of view from a lot of people and a lot of students I talk to, is that the question of rebuilding the city is not whether we do it or not, it's how we do it, because not having a centre city is really counterintuitive to what we think of ourselves as a society. It's sort of like a question of, a city without a centre is almost like a body without a heart. It's really important. And if you look back through the history of human civilization, you see an element of city centre everywhere, whether it was the campfire, the village green, the centre market, right through to our own city centre like Cathedral Square, and how the city was planned around that. And so I sort of look at what is it that makes it indispensable? What is it that we want to capture in the future when we rebuild? And the thing for me was that it was a central place for people. And why was that important? And from my point of view, I think it was a bit of like an enlightenment for me when I thought about, well, it's not the things that are there, it's what it allows us to do. And what it allows us to do, having that city centre, is to build connections. It allows us to connect with each other. It allows us to connect with work, with commerce, with business, with services. It allows us, most importantly, to connect with who we are as a people and our idea and our identity of who we are as residents of Christchurch. And I think for me, that really enlightened the thoughts and how I was focusing on the city centre, because it enlightened the discussion in the sense that we're not just talking about rebuilding buildings, and we can't just focus on the services and the facilities, but we need to focus on rebuilding those ties that connect us together as citizens here in Christchurch. And so from there, that's like 2 slides too late, but should have practiced that one. So what is it that connects people? And I thought about previously it was sort of function, you had to go to the market to buy stuff to survive, or you had to go to the campfire before that, to cook what you'd hunted, your moa steak, or I don't know, Haast Eagle burger, whatever it was they were hunting back in the day. But now that's not what it's for. It's not about survival for us. What it is a higher level thing. It's about having a place that creates that vibrancy and that energy for us, that creates a place that we as people want to live in. And so I guess the question now is, how do we, in the future moving forward, look to activate those connections? And again, I tried to start from the base level, start from the very basic building blocks of what we would need. And the thing that sprung to mind to me first, and the most obvious one I think, is in terms of people. You need people in the centre city, and I think that was something that we were lacking, because you don't want people who are just coming there to shop or just coming there for one purpose. You want people who are there permanently. You want large numbers of people there, because it creates that engagement, it creates that vibrancy and that energy there. And I think this does relate to the argument around the university and its movement to the city, but I'm happy to deal with that later on. So I thought, once we have those people there, what is the connection? How do we really build that vibrancy? And I guess for me, that relates back to how you engage with that environment once it is there. And again, the most basic thing for me is just being there. So how do you get people being there? And I think the key was to focus, for me, the centre city around that pedestrian activity. And although that sounds really basic and really low level, I think it's important that we consider those factors, because that element of pedestrian engagement and the pedestrian movement around the city exponentially increases your engagement and your connection to your environment around you. It connects because you are really engaged in it, you're really connected to it, you can see, you can hear, you can feel what is happening in the city, and you understand it. And I think for us, that relates back to why the centre city is important, because it is important to us as our identity as a group of people and a society, and that helps us link us back. And although that is basic sounding, I think, and studies have shown internationally, and the Jan Gill report that the council got in 2008 really reflected that the significant changes that would have to be made to our city to allow that. And I think this is the perfect opportunity. There will never be an opportunity to allow us to engage with the city like that in the future. And I think it's really important that, although it's a basic thing, that we do focus on that. So, in theory, we now have the people there, we have them connected and engaged. What is it exactly that they are connecting with? And again, if we look at the broad factors that people can connect to and what it is in our city that makes it unique, which will make it special, which will give us that ownership and that engagement there. So the first thing I wanted to focus on was in terms of our natural resources, and there's been a lot of discussion about this, and it is a really important factor. And I think it involves a number of different elements. The first one I think is obviously the working with that in terms of the buildings that we have to ensure that they are a high level of safety, because we know that we're now in a seismically active area, which is in a swamp, which is where we put our buildings. So perhaps if we'd known that stuff previously, we could have developed with that. And I think that's a really important thing to recognise. The next element is celebrating and enhancing what we have in terms of natural environment. So I think that's designing our city, designing the way we move as people around what we do have, such as our green spaces, the trees, the Avon, in terms of the Hagley Park and our views to the Port Hills. We've got a huge asset there that we need to exploit that's not going to break the bank as well, which is another important factor to consider. The next thing is in terms of life and recreation within the city, and I think something that we need to remember and really need to focus on is that no vibrant, energetic city is based around one factor, and so we need to consider a wide range for our whole community. And the example I'll use, one factor, and I'm not trying to be a stereotype here, but one factor is you can't build a vibrant, energetic city solely around retail and solely around shopping. And I'm not trying to be the stereotypical male who's saying that, because I don't want to end up standing outside the shops holding the bags. But I do think it is important that we recognise that element. So what I'm saying here is that we need a range of activities there in order to have a city centre that does engage us and does uplift us and does make us feel at home there. So retail and business would be a huge part of that, but it's not the only element. We need to have a diverse range of invitations to connect with what is our home in the city. So I would see this as being a series of hubs developed throughout the city, not necessarily totally distinct and diverse, but things such along a recreational hub that allows us to interact with the natural environment, as well as outdoor and access to those pursuits as well, and that engagement and connection there. The cultural hub, where we can interact with our history. I see that being focused around the centre city in terms of both our Māori heritage as well as the development of our city in the past. And of course this focuses on the music, the performance, the art installations that are all hugely important to creating a city that people want to be in, people want to engage with, and that's a modern developing city. Of course the buskers plays into that. It's something that we've had from the past that again works well with that and was really important to our identity, because who doesn't want to see a grown man who can fit through a tennis racket? That's brilliant. Of course, the young people perspective that's often, I think, perhaps overplayed, but again is really important, is in terms of the social aspect. And I do see the centre city being a social hub, both not just for the young people, because I think that is overemphasised, but I think there needs to be that strong element of social interaction there in terms of cafes, bars, nightclubs, because as a strong and vibrant city and modern city, that's really important as well.